Got a special guest here on the Illini Inquirer podcast. It's going to be good to catch up with one Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports. He's been covering the heck out of the Big Ten, and we'll get into his thoughts on Illinois basketball, getting ready for the game of the year. I am giddy with anticipation just to cover another great basketball game between Illinois and Purdue. But Isaac Trotter, welcome in. Welcome back to the podcast. And I got so much Big Ten hoops I want to chat to you about. You're rocking your Cardinals hat. We can't talk about baseball. Apparently, they don't want us talking about baseball. But there's so much to talk about. Lovie Smith could be a head coach in the NFL again. I improbably, right? But how you been, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. No, I've been great. I think last night when Lovie Smith got that news, that was hilarious. I thought that was really funny. And, you know, the more I think about it, it's like, okay, that makes a little bit of sense. And I could see how it could work for a franchise like that. But the Texans are going to Texan, and I am really looking forward to the Miles Smith, Lovie Smith defense and how that works. And you know what? They were really bad at the beginning of last year. Got to give them credit. They turned it around a little bit defensively late in the year. Some of the advanced metric stuff on that Houston defense under Smith was pretty good, but man, that's funny. That was really, really funny.
I mean, we could talk about this because Cliff Kingsbury failed up, right? So I don't want to just put this on Lovie. Because I respect Lovie as a football mind. I think he did a decent job with a terrible roster last year at Houston, but the Texans are a mess, man. Like, you go from just this kind of, we hired David Coley to be the Rick Renteria of our rebuild. We just want a guy who's respectable, can keep things together. They fire him, pay him $22 million, and then they're going to promote Lovie. I do find it kind of like poetic for Lovie that he was usurped by Dirk Cotter in Tampa. And now he's kind of usurping David Coley in Houston. But if he gets that job, good for Lovie. But I never imagined that 14 months after he was fired from a bad Big Ten football program, right? I mean, we can emphatically say Illinois has not been good, that he kind of has an NFL head coaching job again. It's amazing. It's amazing, but good for Lovie.
Yeah, I mean, if that gets you paid, do your thing, man. Like, more power to you. But my God, the one thing you missed on that Texans process was the Josh McCown saga, where they're begging other teams to interview him so he looks more qualified for the job that they wanted to hire him for. He's legitimately interviewed for the head coaching spot twice without being a coach on any time throughout his NFL career. It's just
Chicago Bears quarterback legend Josh McCown to you, sir.
Exactly. And he also has very, very good hair. So strong hair game. I can see him crushing.
I can respect that.
Exactly. No, but it would be funny. I would be tuning in to watch Lovie Smith coach the Texans. I wonder if he'd bring the beard back. And I think the glow up for Miles Smith would just be one of the best stories in all of sports. I mean, you're going from
what are your sources on the Miles Smith beat telling you?
You know, Miles Smith has really locked me out of that one. It's been really hard for the former Illinois Miles Smith beat writer. It was really tough when I got blocked on Twitter, and I just don't know if I'll ever financially recover from it.
You and I both joined that club pretty quickly. All right. I do want to bring up one more Illinois football thing. Alex Baucheski is going to set an unbreakable record of starts at Illinois. He's already got 52, back for a sixth season. I give a ton of credit to Brett Bielema for even pursuing this. Like, I don't think Lovie pursues this. He even shoots a shot, but I think they sent a trial balloon up with Michael Marquez, said, all right, this is we'll just try this one, see if we can get it. And for Palczewski, it makes sense. Come back, be fully healthy. I thought he looked great at guard. I think that's always been kind of his spot in the NFL. But man, for Illinois to plug a hole on a very whole field offensive line. Now you got Pearl and Palczewski back. You feel so much better about how competitive you can be in the Big Ten with those two guys back, and then adding some of the JUCO pieces and hoping Barlev takes a step forward, Krutz takes a step forward, and we'll see if they can get Hunter Norzad. But that's a significant bring back. I mean, you bring back an all Big Ten performer to your offensive line, one of your biggest weaknesses.
Yeah, it's amazing how much better that offensive line looks with him in the fold. And I just think about a full year for him at guard. If that's where he can play for a full year, I think that would just be huge for his tape. Veteran, good dude, good with the media. I just feel like he checks off a lot of boxes. And
captain.
What?
He's probably gonna be a captain, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much there. And this offensive line was like such a big concern. And you go, man, this feels a whole lot better now that you got 3 or 4 guys that you feel like you can count on. And then let's figure out for the rest of them there. Like, this year was always going to be weird on the offensive line, but Palcho changes that. And I just hope that he can stay healthy and play a full year at guard, because if he does that, he's got a chance to be, on an NFL roster. And I think that's a very fair thing. Maybe not an NFL starter, but I think he could be 100% 6th, 7th offensive lineman in the NFL.
I think you feel like last year he had 4 average to good starters, and then Badovanak kind of, I think was pretty good towards the end of the year. I don't know if the offensive line is going to be a strength, Isaac, but all of a sudden you feel like you have 2 good offensive linemen with Pearl and Palczewski. And then we'll see what Isaiah Adams, Zylan Chrysler can be right away. Jordan Slaughter, they were high on going into the year. I think he would have started if he didn't get injured. So we'll see how he comes back from injury. But man, you plug one of those big holes there. I think you feel really, really good to get him back. So kudos to Illinois for appealing to the NCAA. And hey, the NCAA doesn't hate Illinois. Can we put that one to bed yet or no?
No, that can't ever go to bed. I mean, as an Illinois, person, as you're surrounded with Illinois, if you're an Illinois grad, you just have to assume that the NCAA hates you constantly. That's just how it has to go. You can't, no new evidence can play into the fact that maybe Illinois doesn't hate or isn't as hated by the NCAA as some might think.
All right, Isaac, before we dive into the Big Ten, I'm looking forward to kind of breaking down where we're at in the Big Ten, about halfway, a little bit more than halfway for most teams through the season. But Illinois basketball, we're recording this right before the AP poll comes out. I talked with a few people that vote for it that had them in the top 10 now. I would expect they'll be right around 9 through 12, somewhere in there, setting up just a marquee matchup against Purdue. But Brad Underwood teams, this is what they do, man. They get much better as they go into January, into February, and then starting into March. I mean, the last 3 years, we've seen that. They've won 8 of their last 10, 4 straight, 3 quad 1 victories in the last 2 weeks. What do you think of Illinois hoops right now?
Man, I think that I'm just going to say it. I think they're sitting on a really big offensive performance soon. Like, I don't know if it's going to be Purdue or coming up here. I think that if you look at the shot quality that they're taking, if you look at the looks that they're generating, even the shots that they're missing, they're sitting on a game where they go for 100. And there's not many teams in the country that can say that. I mean, let's take a look at this. I was looking at some of these numbers yesterday. Purdue, obviously, we know is a horrible defensive team, but Illinois scored 74 points against Indiana while they missed 9 shots at the rim and 8 free throws, right? That's
how many open threes to start the second half?
A ton. I was just getting there. Okay, let's look at Wisconsin. They scored 80 points against Wisconsin. They missed 9 free throws, and they shot 7 for 22 from 3, and they scored 80 points. So you combine what the looks that they're getting wide open threes, they're getting shots at the rim, they're not taking bad twos, and you combine that with a Purdue defense that hasn't stopped anybody all year long. Illinois is really due for a really, really big offensive game, and they're going to need it against Purdue because Purdue is an awesome team. But if you just look at what Brad has done, with all of the injuries and all of the mixing and matching and all of these things, it's incredible. The player development of the freshmen, getting them more and more comfortable while continuing to win is really impressive. And I think that they're poised for a big close here. And I honestly think that they're poised for a huge, huge offensive showing soon, because you're going to have a game where all your layups go in, start shooting 80% from the free throw line, and your threes start dropping. And with the amount of looks that they're generating that are so good, it's bound to happen where they go for a big, big number. And if that comes against Purdue, you're probably the Big Ten champ.
They're the most well-rounded team in the Big Ten. Right. Like, Purdue is the most explosive offensively. I think even Illinois at its peak offensively, they can hang with Purdue. I think we've seen that already, and that's what's going to be fun about Tuesday night. But their defense is number 1 right now in the Big Ten during conference play. That's what has got me really excited, because we know how good offensively. You're saying, like, yeah, they're sitting there where it feels like there's a powder keg of offense that's kind of being left out there a little bit, and they're still winning all these games. That's what makes you excited going into, oh, this team could win the Big Ten tournament, or they could win, get to the Final Four. Right? That's why they're so capable of it. But the defense is consistent, and that's where Purdue's lacking. I think that's where Ohio State is lacking right now, where I feel like the ceiling of Purdue and Ohio State is just as high as Illinois, but Illinois is just consistent because every night that they're playing defense, while Michigan State just kind of lacks the offensive punch, I think, from their guards. Wisconsin, it's all dependent on Johnny Davis, right? Like, or Brad Davison having a ridiculous night. It's just the floor for Illinois is higher than the Wisconsin and Michigan State for me, while the ceiling could be just as high as Purdue and Ohio State.
Yeah, no doubt. And I just feel like this team is is you looked at last year's team and you go, okay, this is a team that can also, the metrics say that you're a team that could potentially make a run to the Final Four, but there's some flukiness sometimes there, right? Like it just, again, I go back to the shot quality because this is some of the stuff I look at all the time. And it's just like, you lived a lot off of some mid-range jumpers last year. Like the spacing on the floor wasn't the same as you have this year. And Mike Woodson was saying about Illinois, how this is a completely different team where just you have so much more spacing on the floor. It's really hard to double Kofi because you have all of these shooters that you're playing out there. And you just have these driving lanes that are going to be there for Curbelo, you think, as he continues to get back. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's barely practiced this year, let alone played a lot, right? So as soon as he starts coming in, it's just a different dynamic. And this team just has the look of one that can make a deep run. Now, you can say that about a few teams in the conference, or you can say that about a few teams in the country, but Illinois can back it up because their defense travels. They're going to rebound the heck out of the basketball for the most part. And when you have veteran guards like Trent and DeMonte that are just continuing to every single night, you can count on them for their defense. You can't find many teams out there that have two guys like that and a rim protector like Kofi. And that means that floor is so high.
Yeah, and Kofi is the start of all of it, right? Like he is really asserting himself. Even a bad half at Indiana, he ends up with 17 and 8 in a marquee game. Trent Frazier's playing like in my opinion, a second team All Big Ten player. I don't know if he'll get that from the rest of the media in the Big Ten, but he's playing like that. And then, Plummer is up and down sometimes with shooting. Grandison's up and down with the shooting, but you said it. I mean, they are such perfect pieces around Kofi Coburn, and DeMonte is really starting to make threes while playing at an All Big Ten defensive level. I think the concern is matchups, right? And it's, if you get a skilled four, like a Dante Scott or an EJ Liddell, that is an issue for Illinois, where that matchup issue, bigger guards, Jaden Ivey, as good as DeMonte Williams is, like, can be problems, but Illinois can battle those teams. Or teams can attack Alfonso Plummer defensively. They can attack Jacob Grandison defensively. So when you get a deeper team, great team like Purdue with so many options, that's where it's going to be tough. I mean, Illinois can lose those games. Obviously, Arizona, they can lose those games when you have 4 or 5 really good offensive threats. But that's true of anybody in the country.
Yeah, I think you just have given yourself such a chance to just compete in those games. And, one thing too, is that you watch this team and it's really hard to go on runs against Illinois because obviously their defense is really good. So you're going to get some stops just because your defense is competing. But offensively, it feels like they just don't go into many lulls often. Like they just don't
not with Kofi on the court, right?
No. And even like you can run Plummer off the 3-point line, but every single time that it feels like teams try to really hard to take him away, he still ends up with 13 or 14 points. I don't understand it. You
mentioned it, Isaac, sorry to interrupt, but Indiana game, it didn't feel like he ever had a big stretch, but every time Indiana felt like it was gaining momentum, Alfonso Plummer got to the free throw line or had a layup, right? Or had got fouled and hit 3 free throws. Every time. So it's they don't go on a lot of runs when you got that many offensive options. And that's what's key. And that's what I think Curbelo is going to be, is when they have gotten in these ruts, is if Kofi's not there or on the foul or in foul trouble, and they just need somebody to break down a defense like Curbelo the other night. Those were 3 big points when Indiana's going on a run and he just gets to the lane, gets a layup and gets fouled and makes a free throw. Those were big when Indiana was up 19-11, I believe.
And it feels like he doesn't even have to try to get into the lane. It's so effortless. And you forget sometimes, you just haven't watched him a lot this year, and you just forget how easy this was. And that's what fascinates me about this Purdue game, because if you look at Curbelo's status, right? Let's be honest, he's probably had 3 or 4 practices total, right? Maybe 5. But this week he's can kind of get a little bit more practices. He's played 12 and 13 minutes in the last 2 games. You can unleash him against Purdue, because what's Purdue's biggest strength, right? Is Zach Edey, right? Let's be honest. That's we can look at the matchup with Kofi and you go, Zach Edey can play him one-on-one. But you can make Zach Edey unplayable by just absolutely destroying him in pick and roll. And that's what Curbelo had some success with. And I went back and rewatched that Illinois Purdue game the first time. Illinois put them in 24 pick and rolls with Zach Edey on the floor, 24. They scored 20 points on those 24 pick and rolls, right? Which isn't that good when you think about it. That's less than a point per possession. But if you go back and look, 19 of those 24 possessions, they had awesome looks. They had Plummer wide open threes because Zach Edey plays drop and you have a wide open look from the top of the key. If Kofi's going to set a great screen, he has wide open threes. They had wide open layups that they missed because they were rushing because of Zach Edey's on the floor. They had great looks from Trent from three. They have creating all these shots. Curbelo had some looks inside against Purdue. And it's like, man, if you can cash in on some of these possessions, right, you're probably looking at 35 to 40 points that you could score off of these pick and rolls against Zach Edey instead of those 20. And that's the difference in the game. And you can make Matt Painter take him off the floor because you cannot play him in pick and roll coverage against Illinois. And then when Travion Williams comes back on the floor, you just go back to doing what you do. And that's 4 out and 1 in because Travion Williams can't stop Kofi at all, one-on-one on the block.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, Purdue's offense is, I don't know if you can stop them. You try to slow them. You hope Sasha has an off night. You hope Ivy's inefficient, but Ivy's going to find a way to get his. Edey's going to get his on offense. The key is, as you said, attacking him defensively because he could be an issue for Purdue on that end. What do you think of this matchup, Isaac? How do you feel if you're Illinois going into this one?
It's interesting. It's really interesting because if you look at some of the numbers, Purdue has run some of the least amount of pick and rolls all year long. But against Michigan, they unleashed Jaden Ivey pick and rolls, and he just went nuts. 23 points. I think he had 7 assists and 6 rebounds. He just went absolutely nuts. And you go, man, if they'd been doing this all year long, how successful would this be? So then again, when I'm watching Illinois Purdue the first time, I go, how many Jaden Ivey pick and rolls did they run all game? They ran 7 pick and rolls for him all game. How many points did he get off of that? 2. He turned it over twice. He missed 2 contested floaters. They blew up 2 plays and they didn't score, and he got an offensive foul. And I go, man, if they play these Jaden Ivey pick and rolls like they did against Michigan, that might be Illinois' case to slow them down a little bit because Illinois defends pick and rolls against Ivey really well, and his in-between game just isn't quite there yet. So if Painter and this staff goes, gosh, we unleashed Ivey on the pick and rolls against Michigan. He did great. Let's go to that a little bit more than 7 times like we did in a double overtime game against Illinois. That might be Illinois' way of slowing them down just a little bit because that's just not the strength of his game. And it's really hard to score in pick and roll coverage against Illinois with the way that Kofi's on the floor and the way that Trent and DeMonte fight over screens, don't get screened, and contest mid-range too. So that's kind of my angle to look at tomorrow. How many of those pick and rolls do we see from Ivey? Because if we don't see those and they go back to what they're doing and Sasha's doing his thing, then Purdue's probably going to score a lot of points. But if they try to push that pick and roll thing again like they did against Michigan, I think Illinois has a chance to slow them down a little bit.
We call a Trent Frazier off night sometimes, and Sasha, he didn't force him an off night. Will that happen again? Can Sasha do that again? To me, that's the key. Is Ivey, Williams, and Edey, if you can keep them somewhat inefficient, I feel like Illinois can do that one-on-one, but you got to slow down Sasha Stefanovic. I thought he was the key to Purdue winning that game. I know Ivey got to the rim. Edey dominated the first half, but the rest of the way, I mean, Bosmans can play a role, hasn't played in 3 games after starting some games, but he can come in and give you some minutes. To me, it's keep Sasha Stefanovic under 3 3-pointers. If you can do that, I think you win this game. Because Purdue's defense, I don't think can stop Illinois. I just don't think they're good enough. I don't think they're focused enough, which is weird for a Matt Painter team. I get personnel wise, Sasha's not a strong defender. Edey's not going to be one. Williams is not going to be one. I always feel like Ivey could be better on defense. I felt that way sometimes about Io last year, but he was much better than Ivey is right now in college. So I think Illinois is going to be able to score. It's just, can you slow them down, which is always the question against Purdue.
So again, those Sasha threes that we were talking about, it was kind of weird because if you again, you look at him, he went 5 for 8 from 3, but I swear, I think he got 2 or 3 of those on offensive rebound kickouts. And that's not necessarily on Trent. I don't all the time, it's just not. And so I feel like if you can minimize those random ones, the random ones in transition or the random offensive rebounds, and just keep them playing half court and just keep them in that type of where your defense is set, then you can probably take Sasha away a little bit more. And I'd be hard pressed to believe he hits 5 threes against Trent in a half court game where Trent's 100% locked in defensively and you're not, in scramble mode after offensive rebounds.
Great point. And the other part about that part that you're talking about is the offensive rebounds Purdue got might have been because Kofi Cockburn wasn't on the floor, right? He was only on the floor for 22 minutes. This is a great defensive rebounding team when Kofi Cockburn's on the court. They're not very good when he's off. So that could play a role as well.
Yeah, and I've been reading your player grades, and you've been nailing it with the Jacob Brandon's not rebounding, right? Like that's your 4, and he's just not rebounding. And that was during the time where he wasn't rebounding either. Now I think he's starting to cash in a little bit more on those defensive rebounds. So if Illinois can rebound the basketball, that takes away a lot of Purdue's opportunities for those second chance points. And again, you look at the numbers, and Purdue didn't kill you in second chance points that game. I think they had only 12 second chance points. But man, it felt like a few of those came on some really big Sasha threes and some really big moments. So just cut those out. Yep. And you got a chance. And again, like we're talking about the best offensive team in the country. You're not going to slow them down in any way. You're just trying to make it a little bit harder, just a little bit harder. Because if you look at Purdue's defense, like I look at weighted defensive efficiency on evanmy.com, really good site. He does a really good job. But weighted defensive efficiency basically takes out the possessions where the game was over. It only counters in like the plays where it matters. Here's Purdue's last 4 games from a defensive efficiency standpoint. How many points per 100 possessions they've given up? 118.3 versus Iowa. That's bad. 117 versus Ohio State. That's really bad. 114 versus Minnesota. That's really limited offensively. That's still bad. 114 versus Michigan. So like you're going to have your chances here to put up a whole lot of points against this team if you just run your offense and do what you do best, which is take good threes and get Kofi post touches and run pick and roll. And I just feel like you're going to have a chance to put up 80. And if you can just slow them down just a little bit by securing those defensive rebounds, by not letting them get in transition, by forcing IB to shoot those tough 2s that are contested, you got a really good chance. Because I'm not scared of Travion Williams. Not at all. Not one bit. Every time that Edey's off the floor, that's a win for Illinois because you can attack Williams on both ends. And I'm not sure Williams is good enough to kill Kofi on the block.
All right, Isaac, can we agree Illinois, Purdue, this is the battle of the top 2 teams in the Big Ten?
No doubt.
Yeah.
It's not even close. It's not even close.
Why do you say that?
I feel like the high end that we've seen from both of these teams are just completely different than anybody else. It's just completely different. It's just a completely different basketball game. Like Michigan State has had some moments where they've been pretty good, but again, they turn the ball over just like crazy and they don't even care. And I don't know who their best player is. I go back and forth on it. Sometimes it's Malik Hall. Sometimes it's Marcus Bingham Jr.
That's my issue with them. Like I love their front court. It's just when I need a bucket in a close game against a really good team, who's the guy I'm counting on? It's Malik Hall. And I like Malik Hall, but he's not for me a second or first team all Big Ten. Like I would want, that team needs a Trent Frazier. Like they need that kind of player. And I just don't think they have it. So I think Michigan State could win 13, 14 Big Ten games. I feel like Wisconsin could end up winning a share of the Big Ten title. I feel like Ohio State, because of their schedule, can find a way to get a share of the title, but that still won't change my mind that Purdue and Illinois are the best teams.
100%. Like I love Ohio State. Like I love the big parts of that team. Like EJ is EJ, and he's been unbelievable. Some of the stuff he does, he's ripping down defensive rebounds and going the other way without even like looking at a point guard. He sends the point guard down. Like he is their point guard sometimes. Like that's Jokic stuff. Like that, like some of that stuff is just like unbelievable. The things that he does.
If he falls to the second round, GMs are going to regret that. Like they regretted Iowa. Like you just stop overthinking it. Like I know he's 6'7". He plays like he's 7 foot. Right. He's skilled. He's ridiculous athletic. He's a great defender. That I would no doubt spend a pick 15 through 20 on that guy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand how you don't, because like the defense too, like you want a 4 that can guard 1s and like that you can switch, you want to play positionless basketball 1 through 4. He's the perfect guy for that. Like, and he can jump out of the gym too. His second jump is absolutely absurd. So I do think that once he goes to NBA Combine, or if he gets into some of that stuff and he does some of those athletic things, he'll rise up some boards just when they see some of the athleticism stuff that he does. But he's stupid good. But again, this Ohio State team has flaws because Malachi Branham is really good, but he's a freshman, and they really miss Justice Sueing defensively. Like he was probably their second best defender, and they don't have him. Jamari Wheeler's a nice point guard who does a good job defending other good guards in the Big Ten, and they've slowed down some decent guards. But whoever's like, if you have 2 good guards against Ohio State, one of them's going nuts. The one that's not guarding Jamari Wheeler is going nuts. And that's just how it's felt like. If you watched Northwestern put up like 87 on them because Chase Audige couldn't be stopped. Like if you look at Wisconsin, like, okay, great. They slowed down Johnny Davis, but Brad Davison went absolutely bonkers on them. So it feels like if you got multiple guards, you can give Ohio State issues. If you only have one, that can be a problem.
Can I give you my hot take?
Oh yeah.
At the end of the year, I think the Big Ten Player of the Year is going to be either Kofi Coburn or EJ Liddell. I don't think Johnny Davis is going to be in the mix.
Agreed. I'm just not like, I think let me pull it up.
It's all respect to Johnny. Like, and he's had an unbelievable year, but it's starting to come back down to earth a little bit. And I think the cream rises. Liddell's awesome, man. Like he is such a fun player to watch. I know that can be difficult for Illinois fans, but he is, man. He's such an easy guy to root for and to watch. And I don't know, like maybe I should let you answer this question, but if there's a team that I don't think Illinois and Purdue fans should take their eyes off of, I think it's Ohio State. I just don't be surprised to see them sneak in and get a share of the title or find a way to be number one at the end of this, because Illinois and Purdue lose a couple games that are tough. Their schedule, they got one of the top 5 teams left on their schedule, and that's Illinois on the road in Champaign. I think that's going to be a monster game because I think they got Rutgers, Michigan, Minnesota, Indiana, Maryland, Michigan State, Michigan left. Like, so Illinois and Michigan State, the only 2 of the other top 5 teams left on their schedule.
It's huge. It's huge. One thing on Johnny Davis, his last 2 games, he's 7 for 32 from the field. That's not good. Okay. All right. Moving on. Yes, I'm with you. And the one thing too that we need to talk about with Ohio State, your boy Zed Key continues to play really, really well. Not against the elite big men in the Big Ten, but against like the mediocre ones, he crushes them. Like he was awesome yesterday against Maryland. I think he had 14 points and 7 rebounds, like 22 minutes. Like that's just what he does. And
it reminds me of what like Xavier Tillman, before Xavier Tillman's like best year, like his first couple years, like Zed Key's got that kind of impact on that team.
He's really good. He's really, really good. And Kyle Young's going to defend, and Justin Arns is a veteran, and you can't let him get threes. And Cedric Russell's another guy that's continuing to start to make some shots at some big moments for them. It's a weird team because you look at him and go, okay, stop BJ and you win. 1, easier said than done. And 2, I think their role players are a little bit better than people think. And combine that with the schedule, with how well they've been able to play at home. Like, I don't think they've lost a home game this year. No, they haven't. No. Like that's a team that 100% is going to be there, no matter how much we might, or, outsiders might not think so. And even Ohio State fans go, I don't think this team's good enough. They say that, like they legitimately say, I don't know if they're good enough. They got blown out by Indiana. They got blown out by Wisconsin. Like they lost to a Xavier team that's well, they're still going to be in the mix right till the very end.
Branham's the key. Like if he's scoring 12 to 15 points a game, that really changes the team. All right. Who you buying more? Like once we get to March, Wisconsin or Michigan State?
I think Michigan State, just because I can trust that they have guys. You know what I mean? And I feel like now I go back and forth because I'm
still pretty good.
Well, I think Tyler Wallace might be Wisconsin's second best player. He's been really good recently, like really, really good recently, and gives them a different aspect. So I'll go Michigan State just because they have the pedigree, and I feel like I can trust Izzo a little bit more than I can trust Greg Gard. And Izzo has a history of his teams get better. Gard has a history of his teams struggle as the season goes on sometimes, and sometimes the shine wears off a little bit with them. But I do think the thing with Michigan State too is that you're going to see Max Christie continue to get better and better and better. And that's like the X factor, because I feel like we've seen the best of Johnny Davis, and I'm not sure if there's any other peak for him. Like it feels like we've seen as good as he can be. And now teams start to have a blueprint on him of letting him take a bunch of shots and forcing other guys to beat them. And with Michigan State, like I feel like Christie's going to continue to develop, continue to get better. And remember, like Ivy had a really strong close to his freshman year, really strong. Can Christie have that? If he has that, that completely changes how Michigan State is, because when he's good, they're really, really good. And you're starting to see Gabe Brown start to make some more shots too. So I'll buy Michigan State just because they have rim protection and defense, and they have a superstar potential in Christie and a lot of guys. And if they can cut those turnovers out, that should be a team that can still be pretty frisky, no matter how many times we see them have like these games where they score 20 points in half.
So book it, Wisconsin share the Big Ten title. That's
correct.
Right. That's what happens from here on out. All right. Who is going to play more of a Big Ten spoiler the rest of the way? Indiana, Rutgers, or Michigan? Like who don't you want to see in late February, March, or in the Big Ten tournament?
Okay. I'll go Michigan here just because they have the best player out of all of them.
He's
like the stuff that Hunter Dickinson is doing every single night is just absolutely insane. He is 100% their entire offense. When they go off, when he's off the floor, their numbers offensively and defensively are atrocious, like absolutely atrocious. I think they're like 27 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor than with him off the floor. Like that's just jarring. Kofi is not that. Like he has like two or three or 4 points better per 100 possessions. And so like he's like the stuff that Michigan can do with Hunter Dickinson is absolutely insane. Let me pull up his stat lines recently. I think he scored over 20 he scored over 20 in 5 of the last 6 games. He had 28, 2-2 against Purdue, 26, 8-2 against Nebraska, and he barely played in 23 minutes. Against Michigan State, he had 25-6 against Maryland. He had 6 dimes, Indiana 4 dimes. Like he just is doing things that is really scary. And so you can have some flaws about Michigan's defense, and I don't like their roster construction. I don't think Juwan Howard's done that great of a job this year coaching wise. I've had a lot of frustrations with some of his rotations and everything, but Dickinson is just, he's an alpha dog. And if they won a few more games, I think we would have a way different conversation about him in the Big Ten Player of the Year race and maybe even National Player of the Year race.
Was he even on the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar watch list?
He was.
Yes, was he? Okay. Because I'm trying to remember. I think maybe he was left off the Wooden Award watch list and Trace Jackson was on it. I'd rather have Hunter Dickinson. Like I have no question. I'd rather have Hunter Dickinson. I'm not trying to swipe at Trace Jackson Davis, but Dickinson, like you said it, he's a dog, man. Like I know he didn't play against Illinois. Illinois is fortunate with the night they had for most of that night. I think it would have been different with Hunter Dickinson on the court. So I'm looking forward to that rematch in Ann Arbor. I still don't know how Iowa is so high in all these metrics. It just doesn't compute with me. But they do look like they're going to make the NCAA tournament as long as they take care of business, probably at home. That feels like a 10 seed. What do you feel about where Iowa is? I mean, think about like if Illinois didn't get Kofi back, or if Illinois didn't get Plummer or whatever, some of these things that happened, it could have been a really bad offseason for Illinois. And kudos to Brad Underwood for being able to kind of maintain this. Iowa's kind of the other side of it. I mean, they've really taken a big dive here. I know they can make the tournament. Keegan Murray's a fantastic player, but where do you think that program's at?
It's a tough spot because I like some of their young pieces, but like this year, we've talked about it before, but Fran McCaffrey's dirty secret is they're 13th in the Big Ten in conference play and 3-point shooting. That's not what you think about with an Iowa team. Let's think about this. Iowa's big thing in this offseason was, we got Jordan Bohannon back. He's shooting 25% from 3 in conference play. 25%. This is a guy that last year he shot 43% from 3. Now, could we see some positive regression coming? Maybe, but there's been times where Iowa's better with him off the floor, right? Like it's weird. It's a weird team. And I like Keegan Murray. I really think that he's done a really nice job of changing his game. I think Chris Murray might be their second best player too. Like both of those guys are really solid, but their
Patrick McCaffrey's starting to play well, right?
Yeah, but their defense is just a problem every single night. Like every single night, it feels
every
like
single season. It's
right. Yeah, it's just, and so they're going to make the Big Ten or they're going to make the NCAA tournament, and they're going to be a fun team. Like if they get the right matchup against teams that maybe struggle to score or teams that are really bad defensively, they can go. But I don't like Keegan Murray's splits against high major and low major teams, right? So his final stat line might look a little bit better than some of the stuff he does in conference play. Now he's still really good, right? Like yesterday, they beat Minnesota and he had, 24-15 and had 3 assists and 2 blocks and 1 steal. Like that's just what he does. But long term, like, do you love a guard that they have coming through their system? I don't know. I think
Sean has some moments. US has some moments. You're like, there's something there, but that's their issue.
Peyton Sanford can shoot the 3. Maybe he turns into the next, whatever white shooter that they've had, Frederick or Wieskamp. Maybe that's that type of thing. But they need some playmakers at guard. They really do, and
they need some guys who defend. I'm sorry, like just their offense is usually awesome. They've been top 20 offensive efficiency for 5 straight years. They've been below 70 in defensive efficiency. Most often it's under 100 in every year, the last 5 years with Fran McCaffrey. Like, do you not try to fix that? Like, I don't adjust something. Maybe they're not able to get the players, but man, they got some athletic, longer wings. I don't understand why the defense doesn't work.
I'm with you. It's weird because you like what Keegan Murray does individually, one-on-one defense. You like what Joe Toussaint has done individually, one-on-one defense. You like some of the Chris Murray defensive stuff, one-on-one. But as a team, they don't gel together. That makes me wonder if it's more about the personnel or the scheme, the defensive mindset defensively, than it does the individual defensive players itself. And that's where I think maybe Iowa has to have a look in the mirror long term. If this continues to not work out, because let's talk about it. You're going to have a Luka Garza and Joe Wieskamp and a run of Wieskamp, Garza, and Murray in a span here. And how many tournament wins are you going to get out of it? How many Big Ten titles are you going to get out of it? Like, that's some really, really good elite talent that's competing for National Player of the Year, like National Player of the Year talent, all Big Ten type of talent. And you don't have a Big Ten title to show for it. And you really didn't sniff one. And that I would wonder if that's a look in the mirror for Fran McCaffrey and just that program overall.
Who feels better about their first year coach, Penn State or Minnesota?
Minnesota, but it's close. It's really close because I really like Shrewsbury at Penn State. I think he's a really good guy, and I think he's a really good coach. They're going to play grinded out basketball. But Minnesota, like, the bar for Minnesota was so low. People were like, is this team even going to win a Big Ten game? And I know that they're only 2-9 in conference play, but like, still, like, the bar was so low for them. And Ben Johnson has completely revamped that culture. And you see guys that actually care. And you see guys that try really hard on a single possession. And you see guys that don't quit in games. And you see Peyton Willis have a career year and Jamison Battle have a career year, because he has confidence in them and he wants them to be elite and he wants them to have confidence in themselves. And I think Minnesota feels like they crushed it with that hire. They got the right guy. And every single Big Ten coach, if you listen to the quotes about Ben Johnson, they rave about this dude. They rave about him. Tom Izzo raved about him. Matt Painter raved about him. Like, they love this guy. And I think he's going to do a really nice job because there's so much talent in Minnesota, and he's going to be a really good recruiter. He had a game. They got done with their game, and an hour later, he was recruiting in a gym in a tournament up here. That didn't happen with Pitino. And I think that they feel really good about it. And Penn State's going to be just fine too, because Shrewsbury's a really, really, really good coach, really good X's and O's coach.
And Minneapolis, man, they're producing as much talent as Chicago normally does. So yeah, if you can keep some of those kids home, that program can be something to wreck with. And that's why Pitino wasn't able to keep any of those kids really. So we'll see what he can do there. All right, we know Maryland's got an open position. That's probably a top 20 job in college basketball. Is there going to be a second Big Ten job opening here? I don't think Nebraska will be, even though there should be. I mean, come on. It's just, everyone thought that was going to work, just like Scott Frost. Fred Hoiberg's now, 5-44, 5-45 in the Big Ten. It's a disaster, man.
And is it weird to say that, like, it looks even worse than the record is?
Yes.
Like 5-45, and like, that sounds awful, but then you watch it, you're like, man, this is bad.
There was no plan. Like, what are we doing? Like, what's he doing building that? I know he did the transfers at Iowa State, but like, some of the guys they're bringing to that program, it's all me. Right. I think we know who we're talking about here. Like, it's all about their shots and this. And it's like, at some point, just get some young guys in there like Brad Underwood did, or, so many coaches have done. Like, I know Ben Johnson is doing a lot of transfers, but these are all lower level guys that just want a shot at the Big Ten. Nebraska is just a disaster of a roster that he put together, and there's no sustainability to it.
Right. Well, and it's all like 1-year guys too, which is different than Minnesota's, because you have a couple multi-year transfers, right? So you have Verge come in here, and Alonzo Verge's been Alonzo Verge, right? That's just who he is. Now you get Bryce McGowan. So that's a big deal for Nebraska. That's one of the best recruits they've ever gotten. And that's a guy, but that's a 1-year guy. Again, that's not a culture. That's not a culture guy. So like, I look at their roster, I go, who's your guy that you can count on to be your leader for the next few years? Like, Trey McGowan's, I really like his attitude. I really like how he defends. I think Eduardo Andre, I don't know if you've watched a ton of them, but he's like that big man that comes off the bench. He has some moments where he's pretty, you can see some stuff there.
Tominaga.
Yeah.
Guy.
Those are culture guys.
Yeah.
You have 3 of them. And I don't know how many more you have there. And so that's the frustrating part. And it looks worse than what it is. And it's really bad. And so I don't think there's going to be another hire come open in the Big Ten, because I think Nebraska will keep him. I mean, what better are you going to do there? You know what I mean? I feel like you maybe you start tweaking your
$19 million buyout too. That helps them. Northwestern's probably going to win enough games, right? Like, yeah. I think they're good enough. They'll find a way to get to 7 Big Ten wins or 8 Big Ten wins. But man, it's just like, what's going, like, it's just kind of back to being, hey, we're 10th or 11th in the Big Ten and we're fine with that at Northwestern.
Yeah, it is. Here, I'll give you a sneaky one. I'm not saying he'll be fired, but what if Chris Holtmann leaves Ohio State? That would be my only one. That'd be my only other one. And we know how you feel about that one, where, you know, it's a football school and he doesn't have a ton of pressure there and he can continue.
What's he leaving for? Why would you leave Ohio State?
I get that. I would be interested to see what jobs come open. You know what I mean? We have to see what's out there, but there's just been a lot of smoke there.
Louisville there.
I would not go to, maybe. I don't know, maybe.
I think Ohio State's just as good of a job, less BS you got to deal with there, and so little pressure. There is so little pressure there that we saw what Billy Donovan did at Florida. Like, no one's paying attention to him, but you can win championships there. I know he wanted facility upgrades. He wasn't able to get those, so maybe you don't get some of those things, but Ohio State does that. Like, they got a good arena. They got great facilities there. So I think Ohio State's a top 15 job in college basketball because of all those things. And plus, they've been really good. You're in a great place to recruit. Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania, if you want to get in there. You can recruit nationally, of course. Like, I just think it's got to be blue blood. And Louisville, they've kind of been on the borderline of that, kind of like UCLA at times nowadays, but I'm not leaving for that disaster of a administration right now.
Right. And I think Kenny Payne's going to be the inside guy there, I think, for Louisville. So that probably takes out. That's just that's the only other job where it just makes a little bit of sense, because Illinois, that's not going anywhere. Purdue's not going anywhere. Wisconsin, you go down the list. Like, there's not going to be much turnover in the Big Ten. And that's why this conference is really fun. That's why this conference is really, really fun, because you kind of know what you're getting on a day-to-day basis. And Penn State and Minnesota have both crushed their hires. So, you know, those programs are going to do better in the years to come. And that just makes it so much more competitive. And if Maryland can get it right, like if that's a Kevin Willard, or maybe they'll go get Ed Cooley from Providence, who's done an awesome job there, like, that would really make this conference even more loaded than what it is.
Who would be your Big Ten coach of the year right now?
Underwood. And I don't know if it's close. Like,
I kind of want to give some shout out to Steve Peichel.
Okay.
I'm not going to vote for him right now, but like, if I had my top 3, I might give Peichel like my 3rd place vote, because he was Jacob Young, Omarui a couple years ago, right? Miles Johnson. And now you're still sitting here. I don't know if they'll finish top 7 in the Big Ten, because they got a tough schedule coming up.
Just going to say that. I was like, have you seen their schedule?
Yes. That's what I'm saying right now. If I had to throw a vote, if they get to 10 wins though, I might throw a 3rd place vote at them, because like, it's pretty amazing. Like, they had a terrible non-conference, but they're Big Ten. They just play tough. Like, I just think he's a really good coach. And I felt bad for him when Jacob Young and Miles Johnson left, because if those guys were back, I think they're as good as Indiana, definitely. And I think they could compete with like the 2nd tier in the Big Ten if they had those guys.
I'd like to know the inside story on that, because like, that seemed weird. Like, Montez Mathis is another one too that left. I think he went to St. John's, and he's a good player. Like, he's a very solid player. So I want to know the inside story on that, and why those guys left or how that happened. But here's my criteria for Big Ten Player of the Year or Coach of the Year. You cannot win Big Ten Coach of the Year when you've lost to Northwestern and to Maryland and to Minnesota and to Penn State. And that's what Rutgers has. Also, you're not allowed to do that when you've lost to Massachusetts and Lafayette in the non-conference.
Just trying to give Peichel a shout out here, man. It's between Underwood and Guard, right? Like, those would be the 2.
Yeah. No doubt. And I think that's where you have to give, that's where Underwood's having all of this trauma that's basically happened with this roster, with Curbelo out and Kofi missing 5 games and Trent missing multiple games. That's where he has the edge. He also has the head-to-head advantage there too, where he beat Guard. I feel like he's set himself up to be really good in this mix. And again, like, you just think about where this program is and where it's come from. Like, their road stuff is just absolutely insane how good they are on the road. And that's not fake. Like, you can't fake that stuff. Like, the recruiting that they've done recently, you don't want to talk about the future because you're focused on the here and now. But I just look at next year, you're going to have 7 top 100 guards in that backcourt next year. 7. You look at the player development that they've done with DeMonte Williams and Jacob Grandison. DeMonte Williams is a 3-star guy, low 3-star guy. Grandison's a Holy Cross transfer. Look what they've turned into. Now think about what they can do with top 100 talent like RJ Melendez and Luke Goody and Brandon Palczewski and some of the guys that they have coming. Like, that's where it's really exciting to think about the future of the program, because you have such high talent combined with, you know, culture that, whatever culture you could say that, but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And player development that's 100% real.
Well, and there's a difference between recruiting and roster construction, right?
Yeah.
And you just look at what Underwood's done. Like Goody, Melendez, and Palczewski next year could play significant roles, and they fill needs at this team. I mean, right now, Melendez plays because they don't have another player like him, right? You know, people focus on Coleman Hawkins so much in that position because he's the one piece that looks like him, that has the ceiling of him. But like Dane Danger is like the perfect complement to Omar Payne. He's something different, gives you a different look. Like Purdue's got so many different looks that they can give teams because they've constructed that roster really well. And then you use a high usage guard and Trent Frazier. You're bringing one in, and Jaden Epps, right? You're losing a defender and DeMonte Williams. You think Sincere Harris can be a pretty good defender, you know, down the line at some point in his career. It fits. And, you know, Plummer was a guy they wanted because they're like, we need a shooter around Kofi Coburn. And the one thing Plummer does better than Adam Miller is he shoots it better. He's even better shooter there. Now, obviously he's not as good of a defender, but that just made sense. It fit. Jacob Grandison fit what they needed. Even in theory, even though he still feels like he's this theory, Austin Hutcherson fit what they needed as this long athletic wing. So I give kudos to Brad Underwood for that. And to be honest with you, staff construction, right? Like, losing 3 assistants and doing this is pretty impressive.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, and listen, we haven't had any conversations about this staff. None. Like, there's been no smoke about this staff.
Oh, they miss Antigua here. Or they miss
right.
Stephen Gentry here, right? Like,
nothing.
Kudos to those guys.
Nothing. Jeff Alexander's a really, really strong under the radar hire. I think he's done a really nice job of just presenting, just being a little bit of a staple from last year's administration and kind of what you want. That's so huge. Like, and Chester's being Chester and Tim Anderson's being Tim Anderson. It just feels like we've heard nothing about this staff. So you look at everything combined. That's why I think Brad Underwood's case for Coach of the Year in the Big Ten is so strong. If you get a share of the Big Ten title, I think you got to give it to him. I think you just have to.
I think he's got to win it. I think he's got to win the Big Ten title, because if Guard finishes tied with Illinois, where Wisconsin was projected, I think most media are going to vote that. And I get it. I mean, Guard is deserving of that. But if Illinois wins the Big Ten title, I think Underwood wins Coach of the Year.
Yes. And the thing too with Guard that I do like his roster construction too. Like, he's done a really good job of, you know, all the guys that left. He, you know, let's be honest, like, there was probably addition by subtraction there a little bit. Like, it's okay that Micah Potter left. It's probably okay that Nate Reavers moved on. It's okay that
Wando Tucker moved on.
Right. Exactly. Right. So you kind of have, like, this fits together a little bit better than what it was before. Like, Tyler Wall and Stephen Crowell had done their thing. Chucky Hepburn's a really nice piece. So the roster construction, if we're going to give Brad Underwood an A for that, we also have to give Greg Gard an A for it too. But I just think when you look at all the extenuating circumstances, Brad Underwood's job has been a whole lot tougher. But I'll tell you what, Wisconsin had some really impressive non-conference wins, and those first impressions can really matter. So if Illinois wins the Big Ten and Wisconsin kind of fades off, then Underwood will be the clear choice. But if it's a little tighter, I think that it's going to be a, you know, kind of 50-50 toss up down the stretch.
I feel the same way about Kofi, Player of the Year. Like, if they win the Big Ten title or get a share of it, I think he wins. If Wisconsin gets a share of it and Johnny has a good finish, they'll probably win. If Ohio State sneaks up and Liddell goes crazy, I think it's really going to matter who wins for that award.
Yeah. And that's how it should be, honestly, because, like, if I think the Big Ten title, I think winning definitely matters with something like that. Like, we kind of heard Andy Katz talk about some of those things with, like, freshman of the year and how winning doesn't matter for that, whatever. Like, but for something like this, winning definitely matters. And how that's why this month there's so much on the line here, because you're talking about legacies. Like Kofi Coburn, if he goes down the stretch here and wins a Big Ten title and wins Big Ten Player of the Year, that's an enormous, enormous thing for the future, for selling and recruiting, for all of these things. And you have so many of these. Johnny Davis is trying to do it. Keegan Murray is trying to have a strong finish here to maybe he gets in the mix there. EJ Liddell is trying to do that. Like, think about Ohio State selling recruiting. If you have EJ Liddell, you go, I went in and took Illinois' best player, like high school player. He came to my school. He sat for a year. He turned into a stud last year. Now he's Big Ten Player of the Year in his third year. Like, you can do that here too. Like, that's going to really, really be impactful down the stretch here.
I was just thinking about, who do you leave off your first team? Like,
I don't know.
It's clear Liddell, Kofi, Davis. And it's hard not to put Murray on there, but like Ivy has to be on. Like, he is their best player. Like, I know how good Edie is, but Ivy is their best player. Like, so Liddell, Kofi, and Johnny Davis are no doubts. How do you finish that the other two? Like, you're leaving somebody off there that you don't feel good about. And
right,
Hunter Dickinson, like, we got to leave Hunter Dickinson off there. Like,
well, and the thing with Ivy too that I think about is, like, what if he was in Wisconsin, switch places with Johnny Davis? What would the stats be for him if he was in Wisconsin? What would his stats be if he was at Iowa, where he was a high usage player? Like, if you go to, I'll pull this up here while we figure this out.
I would take Ivy over Johnny Davis in the draft. I'll just say that. Like, I feel like Ivy is the better player. Johnny Davis currently probably having a better year, but he's just in a different role, as you said.
Yeah. Okay. Here are the guys who have a higher usage rate than Jaden Ivey this year: Boo Buie, Ryan Young, Keegan Murray, Kofi Coburn, Alonzo Verge, Johnny Davis, EJ Liddell, Travion Williams, and Zach Edey. He has the third highest usage rate on his own team, and he's still doing what he's doing. So, like, it's just like that's where for me, like, he's on 100%. You just clear the way, because the eye test has to matter. You can't just look at stats here. You just can't. You got to look at winning, and you have to look at some stats, but the eye test really does matter. So I would have Ivy on there. I would have Kofi. I would have EJ Liddell.
Johnny.
You got to put Johnny Davis on there.
I think I'd put Edie and Trevion on the second team.
So is that first team is coming down to Hunter Dickinson,
Edie, and Murray.
And Murray. I probably could see them putting Murray over Dickinson, just because his stats are just so stupid.
Yeah. I might vote Dickinson. And it's no shot at Keegan. I don't feel good about it. And that's like, can you find a way to get Trent Frazier on the second team?
That's what I'm saying.
I think I can make the argument, but it's like Trace Jackson Davis we didn't even bring up. And I have an issue sometimes with Trace Jackson Davis of like, all right, how many, like, can he win? Like, you got to win games. You got to win some of these big games. He kills the bottom half of the Big Ten. Top half, he doesn't seem to do as well. You know, Ron Harper Jr. is having a heck of a year. So, well, I think Trent is deserving of that second team consideration. It's really hard to figure out a way to kind of get him on there. I mean, Michigan State's probably doesn't have a top first two team guy, right?
I was going to say, what happens if Michigan State wins the Big Ten title and they don't have a top first or second team player?
I did Wisconsin a couple of years ago, right?
I don't know how that works. And that's why this ballot's going to be really interesting. And I also think that this is why this ballot is going to be kind of a difference for pretenders and contenders in the media and how you watch basketball games. Because if you watch these games and you go, okay, well, let's just pick the top 5 stats here, and Chase Jackson Davis is a second team guaranteed lock, or maybe a first team lock, that I think we're just going to learn a lot about some people when we see some of these ballots and who watches the games and who, is watching the right things in the games.
Indiana fans would hate to hear this. Like, if there's but you could make an argument to put Trent over like Trace Jackson Davis. You know what I mean? Like, listen, I think Trace is an unbelievable player, but if Trent's helping Illinois lead them to a Big Ten title, might get an edge with me, whether it's 9-10 or 10-11. I mean, that's might make a difference for me, because offensively he's better than Trace Jackson Davis. And I think defensively, Trent should be the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year over Trace Jackson Davis. So, it's going to be very difficult when I have to fill out that bracket at the end of the year.
And another thing too that you have to take into account is, in the big games of the year for Indiana, Trace Jackson Davis has gotten in foul trouble and wasn't a factor. No factor against Illinois at home, right? 6 points, 6 rebounds, barely played. Purdue, they won that game, but it wasn't because of Trace Jackson Davis. He played 11 minutes in that game, 4 points.
You can thank Finney for that, right?
Correct. And so there's just like times where it's just like against like the best teams. At Wisconsin earlier this year, they lost 64-59. He had 4 points and played, you know what I mean? Like, so it's just like, it's frustrating because you see some glimpses with him. And I said it earlier the year, like, man, he seems really way more locked in defensively and offensively. And then it feels like some of the old habits creep back in. And maybe it's point guard play, maybe it's whatever. Like maybe you can say the guards aren't good enough for Indiana, and that's a completely fair thing. And maybe the roster construction doesn't fit around him quite as good as Kofi has it or EJ Liddell has it, because
imagine if he had a Curbelo. Like if he had a Curbelo, like I'd feel probably better about him. His whole career, he hasn't had that guard. Like Christian Lander was supposed to be it. Boy.
Xavier Johnson was supposed to be it too. And it's
can I own up to 24/7 Sports and every other, like we misjudged that one. Maybe it was because he came too early. Like the reclassifying early thing, I'm not a big fan of, man. 17-year-olds playing college basketball is tough.
And I feel bad because he also got hurt this year and he's really not gotten to show what he can do at all. So it's just like, it feels like he's had bad chances to succeed. But you're right. Like the roster construction, and that's an Archie thing, but it's impacting Trace Jackson Davis. And if we're going to put that list together, like I'm putting Edey above him, and I'm 100% putting Travion Williams above him in the Big Ten Player of the Year race, or in the Big Ten All Conference teams. Like you can't have both of those guys not above Trace Jackson Davis, even though their counting stats might not look quite as spectacular at the end of the year.
Yeah, and I still think I give the edge to a guy like Trent over like Ron Harper. I love Ron Harper, but I just think Trent's year has been ridiculously good. All right, Isaac Trotter, anything else you want to add, man? I think we covered it all with Big Ten basketball here.
I gotta say, we did some good stuff there. Yeah, no, I think the thing is, it's so fun just to see this league, where it's gone and where it's been, and you can kind of focus on the Big 12, and you can focus on things and focus on March issues, but I really think that this league has a chance to make some noise in the tournament. Like I think Illinois can be up there with one of those teams. I think Ohio State and Purdue, if they get the right draws, can be up there. And I hope that people don't focus on some of the March failures and judge this league the wrong way. Because if you watch the games on a nightly basis, maybe they don't have some of the athleticism stuff that you could see on a nightly basis in the SEC or the Big 12, but it's been really good basketball. And I've just been watching a ton of it and really, really kind of feeling lucky about it, because it's just been really good ball.
The one thing I love about this league is we can question March, right? I think the Pac-12 could have another really good year in March. I've kind of liked watching those teams, but like the Big Ten races the last 4 years, if you just look at the Big Ten, I know we judge everything by the NCAA tournament success there. In 2019, Michigan State and Purdue tied for the Big Ten. Michigan was 1 game behind. Wisconsin was 2 games behind. 2020, 3 teams tied at 14-6. Illinois 1 game behind. Last year, we know Illinois won more games, but Illinois and Michigan basically tied for the Big Ten. And Iowa was 2 games behind Illinois, but you had that race with Illinois and Michigan. And right now, you have 4 or 5 teams with 3 or fewer losses. Like these races are ridiculous. It comes down to the last game every year. Like it's not like the Big 12 where it's like Kansas running away from everybody every year. The ACC always seems to have one team, maybe not here recently, but it's just the Big Ten races have just been a joy to watch. It's so competitive.
And that's why this month is so fun, because every single night matters. Like legitimately every single night matters. And I can't wait. I just can't wait. I think the Big Ten tournament is going to be an absolute war. I'm just really excited about it. And, Illinois has everything in front of them. And, I know the vibe in that locker room and in that, those offices this summer was that when they came back and they had their team, they were not trying to get a share of this title. They wanted it all. And they got a chance to go win it all. And they don't want to even to be close. And now they got their shot, and Illinois Purdue is going to be an absolute doozy.
Yeah. Not that like Purdue's not hungry, right? But this team's very hungry, and they're just old. I mean, Kofi Coburn's the young guy in the starting lineup for this team. It's crazy. It's crazy how old they are. And I think that's going to pay off for them. Well, Isaac Trotter, man, good to catch up with you. Good to see you. Continue to kill it with the 24/7 Sports National Desk. It's been awesome to have a Big Ten guy there. So can't wait to see what's next for you, man. But appreciate the time. Appreciate the chat.
Thanks for having me.